Today, what we're doing is talking about our version 3 multi-mapping and some of the questions you may have around our new system and what is different from that to the old system. Also going through some of the added features. I've just done some checks on there, so the oil level's fine, water's fine, everything's checked. It's got a new air filter in it. I'm ready to tow. These cars only hold about 5.5 litres of oil. Yes, in the first 10,000 Ks, they tend to use a little bit of oil, so we need to make sure that is correct. Also, something that a lot of you guys don't know, this car comes out with a 0-20 oil. You really need to make sure if you're towing with this car to have a 530 or a 540 oil, which is what Toyota recommend for this car. This is my wife's car. It has a heat exchanger in it, airbox. It's got our prototype intake pipe on it. It also has our exhaust system, and it's obviously coupled with our multi-mapping that we have, which is our new version 3, and we'll get through that in a sec. The van that we're using today is a Zone RV van. It is a beautiful van. It weighs in around that 3.1 tonne. The car itself is around 3 tonne. It's only got a J-Max GVM upgrade in it, some wheels, and obviously some of the components that we've added to that car. It doesn't have a bar or dual batteries or anything like that, but that's the base weight of the car. So we're probably towing around that 6.1 tonne. But it's a good starting point to show you guys where we are and what we expect out of the car and where everything is in check. So we'll jump in, I'll go through some of the functions with it, and then we'll get on the road and I'll start to run through it with you. I'm going to quickly go through our multi-mapping functions. Been through them a few times before, but I think it's a really great idea to go through them again because there is some little changes here. First of all, we're in map 3. Map 3 is our tow mode, twin turbo that we're going to be doing a lot of testing today, and I'm going to showcase, you know, if you're touring, this is the map, you know, we want you to be in, and the reasons why. But up from that, we have map 4. Map 4, as you can hear, exhaust gets a little bit louder. This map has got a lot more power than the tow map. You know, it's for everyday driving, no van on the back, beautiful map to drive, heaps of power, works really, really well. Obviously then going to say map 5, we've got lumpy idle. Again, the things like launch control, lumpy idles on that, it's making a little bit more power than map 4. It's about having a bit of fun. That's all that this map is for. You know, we don't expect you guys to tour Australia with lumpy idle on, but at the end of the day, it's a map that was designed around power. If we go back to the under 3, map 2 is now what we call the single turbo tow mode, which originally was stock plus. The fact that we didn't want to get rid of the tow mode single turbo, we wanted to keep that, and that mode is definitely still in place. So it's in map 2 and map 3, there's 2 different tow modes, one's single, one's twin turbo. You might ask, where's stock plus? If you wanted to use that, it is still on map 1. However, map 1 is our winch mode and idle up. We figured that a lot of people, from the feedback we're getting from customers, no one's driving on stock plus at all. So we thought we'd move it to that particular map there. And we also still have immobilizer as well, which is exactly the same, and that works the same way. So look, that's our multi-mapping quick overview structure. We'll go do some driving and yeah, show you what it's all about. Today is about running through our new version 3, and I'm concentrating on the tow maps and the functions we built into version 3 and how they're going to help you. So we're going to take off now, get down the road, and we're going to start talking about our new tow map. So in our previous multi-mapping, we had one tow map, which was a single turbo mode, and the reason for that was to eliminate the surging issue. But the downside to the single turbo mode is that it's great for anything under, you know, that 2000 RPM, but anything over that RPM, well, you don't have the power because you're running on one turbo, but it definitely does stop the surging. So I wanted to improve on this, and we knew that with the intake design and then redefining the maps and then trying to make it work better, we perfected the crossover points, and now we've got a tow mode that we are towing with without the surge, getting the consumption and the power that we need to do everything it is to tow these vans and do it safely, reliably, and keeping sure that those temperatures are coming down as well. So it's something that we've spent a fair bit of time on. So at the moment, we're in map 3 in the twin turbo mode, and this is the mode that I want to concentrate on the most with what we've done, because this is the system that I believe majority of the people that have a 300 series with this type of setup, should be towing in. I'm going to go through some of the functions, the safety functions, as well as all the other added functions we've added into version 3. One of the most important things that everyone kept on asking for was when I select manual mode with my gear stick or sports shift, I have no cruise control. I can't activate cruise control. Well, we've solved that issue for you guys. You can now use cruise control in manual mode. Something else that we've added into the manual mode is now a lockup. For ages, having a lockup in these cars, the lockup works well where the converter locks up, keeps those temps down. Everything works pretty well. However, once you start pushing the car, you have the issue where the converter will start to unlock and lock again, and a very similar problem like the 200 series used to have. So we've got the ability now to lock that converter in and keep that locked in. We're on the Bruce Highway, we're heading north. So I'm gonna just select it over to manual mode. We're in 6th gear, the converter's now locked. We're going to put it into 7th, converter's locked. We are going down a bit of a hill at the moment, so when we get back up, we'll be able to simulate that a bit more. The great thing about being in manual mode is that you can literally have your foot buried when the converter's locked up, and it'll pull you wherever you need to go. Got to remember that because we're locking it out, if you want to be able to get up the hill quicker, well then you need to downshift manually because we are potentially in manual mode. In manual mode, if you are coming up to say a hill you're doing 1200 RPM and you're really starting to struggle, the motor can't produce any more power, we will downshift you just 1 gear, just so that we get you back in that power band to be able to then pull up. And that helps also when you pull up with a set of lights, because if you make it true manual mode, you'll find you pull up a set of lights and you'll still be in 6th gear and not realize you're trying to take off in 6th gear. And we don't want to have transmission problems or overheating issues when you're starting to try and take off in a large gear. So that will put you back to 1st gear when you pull up with a set of lights. So there's all those things that help. The great thing is about having the converter locked in now, we're cruising along with 7th gear. We really aren't getting into it that much at the moment. We're sort of doing that 2 gram. I'll go up to 8th now. Converter's still locked in. And the great thing about the converter lockup kit in this particular car that we've got in place is that we kept part of the strategy that the factory and the OEM is using for locking and unlocking the converter on gear change. Not only does this take the load off the sprag, but it allows a smoother gear change, where previously when we had lockup kits in other models of cars, you'll find that when it changes gears, it's a little bit firm. You will notice it when it changes gears. This is definitely a lot more seamless. It's a beautiful transition. You don't tend to notice any of those previous problems that we would have. So I'm just going to set cruise control on now. I'm in manual, so I'm 8th gear, converter's locked. We're doing around about 1600 RPM. So we're just going to make sure we're in map 3, and I'm just going to select. And now we're in cruise control. And so as you can see, my feet are off the pedal. We got cruise control. As the dash is saying, we're in 8th gear. I can go up to 9th gear. I can go back down to 7th gear. I'm still in cruise control. This is all still working. And as you can see, it goes into gear, then locks up straight away as soon as I change that. This is fantastic. What I found, what was really good about this is not only towing and maintaining those speeds in those certain gears without having it hunt all the time. As you can see at the moment, if this was in drive, we would be down 2 gears and the RPM would be coming up and we'd be taken off down the road. Now that we're stuck in 8th, it'll just chug up the hill and it'll help with that fuel consumption. Something that was a little bit left field was when I found I was driving the car without the caravan on the back, I could cruise along in 10th gear at around about 90 Ks, and we're just sitting there around 1200 RPM, and it would chug along the highway doing that. And my consumption was the best it's ever been by doing that. That made a huge impact. I can't do that in drive, and that's why being in manual now with what we've done with the lockup and being able to activate the cruise control, it works so well. So a lot of people ask, why wouldn't Toyota bring this function out from basically factory? Why wouldn't you have cruise control be able to be active in manual mode? And it's a little bit more complicated than that. I believe that they would have. However, being a sequential turbo setup, you have to be very mindful about the changeover, and if you have cruise control set in place and how that crossover point will be. And I think you would find that without solving the surging issue, you're going to exacerbate it massively with cruise control. So, they knew this in mind, and this was a way to try to possibly avoid that situation. So you can see we're coming up the steep hill at the moment, and we're now in 7th gear in manual mode, converter's locked. So we're maintaining the 100 kilometers up here. It's quite a steep hill that we're going up at the moment. It's really that simple. Driving this car is a breeze. Been towing with it for a fair bit of time. Coming from a 200 series with the way that the transmission worked to then a 300 series, and refining what we have makes a very big impact on the way the car drives, especially tows now. That's the cruise control. That's how the Easy Lock works. There is no thinking about, hey, do I have to push a button to put it in for here or there? If you're in manual mode, the lockup works. If you're in drive, the factory lockup still works. However, it will disengage a lot easier, where now in manual mode, it will lock in and stay locked in. Unless you are changing down or up gears for that split second, that will do that on gear change. So the lockup works from second gear all the way up to 10th gear. It does not lock up in first gear, and that's because of a mechanical reason. So lock up second all the way to 10th. It only works that way in manual mode. It doesn't work that way in drive. Obviously drive is like factory form. However, now when you're in sports shift, up and down, it does its job, and it does its job extremely well there. So this has been probably the biggest improvement to the towing of the car, and understanding how we can use a lockup to reduce those trans temps down and make sure that it all works well. And one of the biggest things is trans temp is such a huge thing in the 300 series. Now that when you're traveling on big loads and you've got that converter locked in, you pick the right gear for your weight, and you can go up any hill. It's not a matter of what hill. Now you can lock it out. It makes a huge difference. So we don't have those problems anymore. So now that we're talking about temperatures, brings us to the next thing. A lot of people ask, do I need a heat exchanger? You know, why do I need a bigger airbox and all of these things? Now, the big thing here is that we're trying to stabilize intake temperatures and reduce those temperatures down so we can improve the efficiency of the engine and the power for long term, right? So when we put an airbox in that has a larger intake that goes to, say, a safari snorkel, the good thing about that airbox design is that we're able to produce that boost pressure at a lower turbo speed, which essentially gives us lower intake temps. The fact that we can add a heat exchanger on the front to add more volume to our intercooling system, that gives us a massive benefit of reducing those temperatures down further. Something that's in version 3 that wasn't in the earlier versions is that now we have the ability to adjust the duty cycle of the intercooler pump. And what this allows us to do is run it full time while we're towing to ensure that we're cooling that water down. Before we were limited by what we could do there, and now we can cool that right down. So we've even got more of an edge of where we're dropping those temperatures down. We find that that has made a massive improvement on getting this car to do what it needs to do. So they're some very important things to have, especially if you're touring and towing. You know, when we start talking about colder climates, it's not a big thing because the ambient temperature is cooler, but definitely in Queensland, in the Territory, and as we're heading north, the air is so hot. We've got so much humidity. It's not great for engines, and they struggle. So all the cooling that we can add to these cars, the better they are. So if you want reliability, it's always about maintaining temperature. That's one of the biggest key things with anything. All right, so this leads us to our next function that's in the ECU, which is to do with our protection system that we put in there. The first thing we put in there is an EGT protection. This is something that you don't need to monitor or check. It's something that we're monitoring in the background. And what we're doing is we're monitoring the EGTs that are in the car, and we are reducing the fuel based on those EGTs. So as the EGTs start to climb, we start to pull fuel out and stabilizes those EGTs off, so you don't have to worry about those temperatures increasing. So there's no need for gauges, no need to monitor that, because we're monitoring that now with a closed loop system that we have there for that protection. The other things that we have is some warnings, and we wanted to put these warnings in place because I feel as though all the cars I've owned, especially Toyotas, something about them where the engine's getting hot, say you got an air leak or you had a water leak, you don't really know the engine's overheating until it's usually too late. And that's the worst thing about it, because it's got a gauge. Like a lot of the time you're not looking at the gauge while you're driving all the time. Just like your fuel gauge, it's one of those things that you glance at every now and then. So it's the chances of the engine's now overheating and there's a huge problem that you actually glance down and go, oh, we are getting hot, you know. You should have your attention paid, on the road where you're going and not have to worry about staring staring at gauges all the time. So we added this function in, and I love this function, is that when you're cruising, you're going up a hill, as your coolant temp starts to get up, if you get over the 105 degrees, the engine light will start flashing at you. Now we're activating that system. It's not setting in DTCs in the ECU. We're activating that system to warn you that the temperature of the coolant temp is starting to increase and you need to back off. It's nowhere near damaging at that point, but it's a warning to say, hey, you're on your way there. We also have this set up for boost pressure that gets too high. We have it set up for EGTs that get too high. And also we've got things like RPM limits and other sort of cool functions that we've got monitoring other sensors. But the most important ones that I have is to do with temperature, and that is to do with coolant temp. And I believe that's the one that is very, very cool on these cars, to now being able to offer this. And you can just drive along. If you see the engine light flashing, it's really simple. You back off. If the engine light, you're coming to a stop and it's still flashing, then something's wrong. You've lost water, your engine's overheating, there's a problem. But this peace of mind knows that now if there's nothing on your dash, you just gotta keep driving. There's nothing to worry about. So we're taking control. So we're saying, hey, if there is a concern here, instead of putting you in limp mode and taking all the power away, we're like, hey, just to give you a heads up that this is getting warm, and this is something that you can monitor yourself. We think it's a really cool feature to have, but that is completely built into the back end of our version 3 now. So that's something else that is, really good value for money in my opinion. We're coming up to Croy Hill. It's, a relatively steep hill, and what I'm just showcasing is we're sitting in 8th gear manual mode with the converter locked up. We're going to pull up this, and I want to show you with the logger where our temps go, how it stabilizes, and where we go from there. So we're at the bottom of the range at the moment. We're maintaining 100 kilometers an hour. The car's sitting around that sort of 1700 RPM at the moment, which is, it's doing this really, really easy. I'm not really having to push too much here. We're just still cruising up this hill. It's amazing the torque that these engines have under 2000 RPM just running off one turbo. They produce around that 600 Newton meters, and to be honest, it's a lot to be able to get up a hill. So I'll give it a little bit more now. We're starting to get up there. So we're just going to change down a gear. So now you can see the coolant temp's got to about 100 degrees, which is what you expect up a big hill. So that got up that hill really well. It maintained temperature. Our temperature stabilized. Coolant temp got up to that 100 degrees, which is, it's completely normal to go up to those ranges. Obviously we're cruising around anywhere from 88 to 92. So to have that 10-degree increase, you're putting the engine, transmission, everything under a lot more load, going up quite a steep range. And what it does is that because we can maintain and hold that fueling as well as the boost control in there, it makes it so much better to drive, as well as maintain those temperatures, which means essentially you guys have a safer car to drive with. And that's what it comes down to. And now with the ability to use manual mode and having the converter locked out and adding cruise control to that, it just makes the whole process seamless. So if you're towing with the 300 series, I advise that this is what makes it so much better overall to use. This other feature was put in, and I love this feature. A lot of people talk about the lag that you get taking off in these cars, and most people talk about this in general. Majority of diesel engines that are out there, they talk about getting off the line, or they may be turning a corner, or they just don't have the acceleration and they've got a delay. And a lot of people get throttle controllers put on their car. They range from $150 to $250, and they work quite well. One of the downsides to doing this is that when you're intercepting the pedal, it's a huge risk to make sure that if that system fails, do you have full throttle or do you have no throttle? And I've seen scenarios of both in the past. It's just something that I've always been concerned about. But I love the idea of how they operate and how they function, because they definitely do make a different impact to how you drive your car. One of the things with tuning was we would have a customer complaint or someone come back saying, hey, either my throttle is too sensitive or not sensitive enough. And we found it was a very personal thing. Not everyone wanted their throttle to be like I like it. So that's when we found by putting this in place, it was allowing the people to adjust their own sensitivity. So now you'll see on the dash, I'm driving on at the moment, I'm gonna hold in my cancel button on the cruise control. I've just turned cruise control off, and then I'm gonna hold in the cancel button, and you can see the engine light flashing, and I can change the throttle sensitivity on this, and they're in 500 increments, so they're different to the multi-mapping. And once the engine light stops flashing, when I got my finger off it, it's now programmed. So it's programmed that setting of sensitivity, and you can feel the difference in the car. I'm not moving my foot, and you can feel the car going, accelerating and then going down acceleration. This is just to set that sensitivity of what you would like to drive with. The cool thing here is that people go, well, majority of the time I'm driving on one setting, I'm not always changing it, but I like it being a little bit spicier than factory. It's how I like to drive. I want to feel the response, and I want it to be on straight away, and that's why I like at 3500 we've got a really nice throttle sensitivity table in there that works really well. So the other two modes at 1500 and 500 are throttle sensitivity that are for forward driving. So if you're forward driving and you're in rocky situations, you'll find that the car's not going to jackknife back and forth, and it gives you a little bit more control over the car without it getting away from you. Then we go up to say 4500 or 5500. These areas have throttle tables that are a lot more spicier. They are very responsive. You know, it's one of those things I personally wouldn't drive with that much response, but they're there if you really want to have a bit of a play and drive the car and feel like it's got all that bottom end grunt. They're definitely tables to use, so they're there. But the good thing is that you have that option with the multi-mapping to change that to whatever you like. And now that is all built into the ECU, so you're not worrying about a module failing, cutting wires, putting something intercepted in. There's none of that. It's all done in the ECU now. So when we do it with the ECU, it's far safer, and it's ensuring that everything is checked out and making sure that everything works the way it should do. The great thing in some of the tuning, we've ironed out some of the little bugs that we've had. We've also ironed out some of the way that we do things. We're refined and made sure that we can do them better. Certain things like the lumpy idle and launch control, we've got control over the fuel in those areas now to make sure that we don't have any excessive rattling noise from the engines. You know, just some little things like that that have improved the quality of those functions as well. Something else that I've added, I've also changed the idle structure on these cars. Now, everyone asks, my idle is a little bit higher, and it's only bumped around 70 to 100 RPM depending on what map you're in. And the reason I do this is to make the car get off the line so much easier. Now, everyone will be like very skeptical, and it wasn't until I started trying this with 79 series and 300 series and 200 series, I started to realize that, hey, this is really good. The first reaction I get from a customer is, hey, my car's idling too high. They don't like it because it sounds a little bit different to it used to. But I always say to them, hey, give it a couple of weeks, drive the car, give me your feedback then. I'm more than happy to change it, but I just want you to try it first. And to this day, I've only had one person wanting to put back to the way it was. The rest of the people are like, wow, I'm amazed at the difference. It's just so much easier to drive. And it's not a matter of driving as we are now, because obviously we're up to speed, but getting off the line, that 100 RPM makes a huge difference for the motor just to get moving that little bit easier. The other thing that we wanted to talk about was our boost control strategy and our fuel control strategy. In version 3, in our multi-mapping, we have a new boost and fuel control strategy. What this means for you guys is that we have better control over these systems, which means better efficiency, cars run better, everything works better. That's what really it comes down to, you guys, and that's what the basis of, you know, the understanding of it. It just makes the car drive so much better. It allows us to do our job in a way where there was limitations before with the OEM stuff, and now that we've built in these functions, we are getting better control on these particular subjects. So this makes a huge difference to us, and essentially makes a huge difference to you guys once you start driving these cars. Probably one of the only last ones that we sort of cover with added into version 3 is we have Overboost Protection. So if we have a scenario where you may find that you have a situation where a turbo has got a problem, or there's, you know, some other scenario that comes through, if the boost pressure gets set too high and it's gone to that mark, we have a fail-safe mode set in place where we can basically control that overspeed and then stop the turbo from failing or anything like that. That was just another safety feature that we wanted to put in place. I guess this is one of the reasons why we wanted to create multi-mapping. You know, a lot of hype say, I just only need one tune, and yeah, that's fine. This car, I'm not towing with this car all the time. There's probably a large percentage of the time of owning this vehicle that I'm driving without a van, and I like having that power to be able to, you know, accelerate into traffic and just have that enough grunt there. However, when I'm towing with it, I need to make sure that the tune is in check and being safe and everything's being monitored correctly, and it has that. So you've got the ability to have a high-powered tune still ticking all the boxes, but probably not something that you would tow with, and then having a tow tune that is designed around towing heavy loads continually. And they are set up completely differently, and this is something that I don't believe a lot of people quite understand, is that tuning a car for a certain load point for a certain scenario is one thing, but tuning it for, you know, 2 different scenarios, well, that's where the multi-mapping is beautiful. You can definitely have your cake and eat it. You can have the car where it's conservative, it ticks all the boxes, and then when you want more, you can get more just by flicking the cruise control switch up and away you go. All right, so we're at the end of our video. I hope you enjoyed it and I answered the questions that you have. If you want any more information, please get in contact with our guys at the front. They'll be happy to answer any of those questions. Also, this is going to be available not just through us, but also our distributors. If you've had a multi-map in the last 6 months through us or either our distributors, we will update for free. However, if you're past that 6-month point, there is a small gap fee to go up to the version 3. We also are pushing this into doing the intake pipe at the same time, because this is a critical component. This will be released very shortly, and with that in mind, this makes these cars amazing. So any more questions or queries, please ask those guys. And a special thanks to Zone for letting me use their van. I've had it now for quite some time. They've been really great to deal with, so big thanks to you guys.